Joining us now, Congressman Rob Wittman, 1st District, Virginia, Republican, also ranking member of the Sea Power Committee. Thanks for being with us, sir. Happy New Year to you, your family, the boys, the girls, and your lovely wife, Catherine.
Well, John, thank you. It's great to be back with you in the new year, and obviously lots of things happening, not only here stateside but around the world. So I appreciate the opportunity to be back with you.
Can you elaborate on your view of the Trump hit on Soleimani, whether or not you thought that was the right thing, and where we go from here?
Absolutely was the right thing, John. We know that Qasem Soleimani has been behind terrorist activities. We know that he has targeted Americans. We know that he has led to the death of Americans, American military. We know the things that he has done plainly just based on those instances. Knowing where he is and being able to take him out, I think, takes a prominent terrorist out of the realm of doing harm against Americans. We also know this. We also know that on the Iranian-backed militia attack on the embassy in Baghdad, that Soleimani was less than 15 miles away, and there's reason to believe he was probably part of coordinating that attack. We all know, too, that he was planning other activities against the United States and its interests. So, yes, I think the president saw an opportunity there and chose to take that opportunity, whereas previous administrations did not. I think this does send a clear message to Iran about what we will not tolerate. And again, look at the things that he has orchestrated. The attacks there, Iranian-backed attacks against Saudi Arabia, the Iranian-backed attacks in Iraq. You know, Iran is trying to influence the government in Iraq. We saw the vote there by the parliament. By the way, while it was a unanimous vote, think about it. The Kurdish representatives in the Iranian legislature voted to abstain. So the Kurds are actually there in support of the United States, and we all know that many of the representatives in the Iraqi parliament are indeed Iranian-influenced or Iranian-supported members of that parliament. So we see the impact that Soleimani has had in that region, and we see the things that he has done against the United States. We have seen American men and women that we buried at the hands of Soleimani's efforts to kill Americans. So I think it was entirely appropriate, and again, sending a message there to Iran about what we will not tolerate, and that is their continuing efforts of violence throughout the Middle East. And I think it sends a message to the rest of the world, too, that we are not going to do one thing or say one thing and do something different. This is a strong stand, and the president has made that stand. And I think that there are opportunities from this. Now, listen, some folks will say, well, this accelerates tensions in the area. I don't think Iran wants to get into a war with the United States. I don't think it's the United States' intention to accelerate things, but I do think the United States has made a determination under the Trump administration. They will not tolerate the efforts by the Iranian-backed government to foment more violence in that region, to try to increase their influence in the region. And again, we see the things that they are trying to do, and that is to foment violence in the area and to attack U.S. men and women in uniform and U.S. interest in the region.
The attack was in Iraq. It was not like they went to Tehran and hit him, right? It was in Iraq, where we have an agreement with the Iraqi military. We have bases there. People surrounded our embassy. We all remember what happened in '79. So you just said you were absolutely convinced that the president had all the authority he had to do this, yes. And the merits of it made sense because, I mean, the president has shown restraint. This is what I want to understand. I mean, they blew a hole through a tanker. They bombed an oil field. They shot down a drone. The president showed restraint, didn't want to escalate it. But now you surround an embassy. I mean, those of old enough remember, those of us that are old enough remember 1979, the embassy, the hostages, how long that went on, what a disaster that was. What exactly, let me just ask you this. Your Democratic colleagues who are impugning the president, What exactly did they expect him to do? Nothing?
Well, exactly, and you laid out, John, perfectly the course of events, the attack on the oil rigs there off of Saudi Arabia, the attack on the oil tanker there, the taking down of a drone. I mean, we see these things continue to accelerate. Now the Iranian-backed militia attack on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. We see the acceleration of these attacks. We see more and more activities by Iran, both direct and indirect, that the president said, we're going to act, we're going to interdict this, we are going to stop this before it becomes a situation where afterwards somebody's going to say, well, why didn't you act? Why didn't you do something to deter this? And what the president did was, I think, twofold. It was to take firm action to say the course of events that Iran has prosecuted here in the last year, led by General Soleimani, are intolerable. But the things that are in the planning stages are things that we want to prevent. And we're going to send a message to Iran that you are not going to do these things with impunity. And this also deters any acceleration of future actions, which I believe were in the planning by General Soleimani.
Where do we go from here?
Well, where do we go from here? Obviously there are lots of threat coming out of Iran, and we understand that there will probably be some action by Iran. And the president has said, "Hey, be careful, because if you act, we will react." So I think at this particular point, what we want to make sure is that we stand strong against the Iranian regime, and know that with this new commander now of the Iranian Republican Guard, that we have to understand that if there is an action, that we obviously need to make sure. And the president has said, "Hey, listen, we won't just take equal action. We will take a stronger action than what you may perpetrate against us." Again, with the effort to deter. Some folks had said, "Oh, he's trying to accelerate things." No, he's given a warning up front, saying, "Hey, don't do it, because if you do, here's what you can expect in return." So I do expect the Iranians will do something. But if you look in the past, the Iranians, when they have come out with all this rhetoric, have done some things, but they have been less than what they said they were going to do, and then they have stopped. So I think this is a situation where we see what the Iranians do and look at what the proper reaction is. I don't think the Iranians want to go to war. I know certainly the United States doesn't want to go to war, but we are not going to stand by and let Iran, through the actions of General Soleimani, continue to go after the United States and United States interest in the region, and be allowed to get away with accelerating the conflict in the region. So I look at this as being really a deterrent effort there. So the critics that say, "Oh, the president's trying to provoke war," what he's trying to do is to keep this from accelerating to something that gets totally out of hand and then turns into a conflict in the Middle East that brings the U.S. into the center of it.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Trucking Truth Across America. We are with Congressman Rob Wittman, Republican 1st District, Virginia. That's the Central Virginia area, Fredericksburg, Stanton, up through the Neck. He is also the ranking member of the subcommittee on Sea Power Readiness Deployment. We've sent a number of assets now to the Middle East. I know there's certain things you can't comment on that are classified. Can you just give us an overview?
Sure. Well, we have indeed accelerated the presence of the United States military in that region. I mean, we always maintain some level of presence there. Obviously, we keep an aircraft carrier in the Gulf through the years continuously. Here recently, we've had some lapses in that presence, mainly based on making sure we can get carriers out of maintenance or out of repair back into deployment. But we do have an increased presence in the area. And again, it's to do two things. It is to be able to deter, but also to be able to, if something does happen in the region, for us to be able to appropriately respond to that. So I think those two things are going on. And those include, John, assets of all the United States military. So it includes those assets that are deployed by the Air Force in certain areas there, as well as Naval and Marine Corps assets, as well as U.S. Army assets. So we have assets at sea, in the air, and on the ground that are there ready to react, but also gathering intelligence on what the Iranians may be contemplating in reaction to the United States taking out of General Soleimani.
So when you talk to your colleagues today regarding Nancy Pelosi's salvo last night, which I was very disappointed in because I thought it was highly partisan and not really in the spirit of what the purpose of Congress is, to limit the president's ability to make decisions as it relates to the Iranian conflict. Where's the new AUMF? I mean, we have talked about, I just had Scott Taylor on. We have talked about getting a new AUMF for years. And I knew you were sympathetic to that. Taylor called for it. In fact, he went into Paul Ryan's office, then Speaker. Ryan lied to him, point blank lied to him, period. Say it right in the air. Said he was going to get it to the floor, and he deep-sixed it at midnight in rules. Boehner did the same thing before that, and Pelosi did the same thing before that. So none of them would debate AUMF. Now she's talking about limiting the president's ability via the War Powers Act, which she refused to bring the AUMF up, and neither did any of your colleagues on two sides of the aisle. Tell the American people how this makes sense and the hypocrisy from her statement last evening, not willing to bring up AUMF after all these years.
Well, John, we absolutely need a new AUMF. The previous one has expired. The conditions obviously are very, very different today. We do need to have a vigorous debate and a new authorization of the use of military force, period, plain and simple. Secondly is, especially in this realm, the last thing you want to do is to limit the president's ability to react to the situation around the world. In fact, what it sends is a message to others to say, by the way, you can do whatever you want with impunity because we have tied the hands of our president in what he can do or what he has at his avail to either deter or to react to situations around the world. I mean, listen, this has come up in the past to even limit President Obama's ability to do those things. And listen, I wasn't in support of limiting President Obama's ability to react. So this shouldn't be a partisan thing, and it shouldn't be a situation where the Congress ties the hands of the executive branch. We expect the executive branch to be able to react because Congress cannot react quickly. Congress has to get together and vote and debate and those kinds of things. And just based on the process, it's not something that you can react to quickly to situations around the world. So, yes, there needs to be a new AUMF, and no, we should not tie the hands of any president in what they have at their avail to react to the things that happen around the world, especially when U.S. interests or U.S. men and women are attacked.
So, the president has said in a tweet earlier today, I'm not going to read it word for word, but I'll paraphrase it because that's easier. He said, basically, if there's retaliation, we're going to respond measured but in kind. Now, NATO is having a meeting today to decide what mobilization or what they have to do as tensions escalate in the Middle East. So I want you to comment on that and the fact that the Iraqis vote to kick us out. I mean, just in Parliament, I just had Scott Taylor on, who's now running for Congress in the second, who says if we leave, Iraq is likely to get partitioned up into three separate entities. Comment on all this.
Sure. Well, first of all, the vote in the Iraqi parliament was not unexpected. It was a vote based upon members that are Iranian supported. So you know that they are going to be voting in the interest of how they're being directed by Iran. Mm-hmm. Notice too that all the Kurdish members of the Iraqi parliament abstain. So we do have folks there that are plainly in support of the United States. The prime minister there, Abdul Mahdi, has said, listen, I'm kind of in support of what the parliament has done. I know that our ambassador is going by to meet with the prime minister, Abdul Mahdi, today to talk to him about whether or not he's going to follow up on again, it's just a recommendation or a suggestion by the parliament. It is not binding to send out U.S. forces. Listen, it is not in the U.S. interest to send forces out of the region. The reason they want U.S. forces out there is because they want Iranian influence to continue to increase. And listen, if that happens, that does beg the question of, at that point, do you now advocate for an independent Kurdistan? And I think that would actually be the time to pursue that. I mean, the Kurds have been by our side in the region throughout this entire conflict, and they are only allies in the region, and they're the only buffer between Iran and continual Iranian influence in Baghdad. So, to me, yes, it does beg the question of whether Iraq now gets split up into certain regions, and you have now an independent Kurdistan that's formed. So, I think all those elements are there, and certainly will be unfolding here in the weeks to come. And I do think that the United States does need to advocate if Prime Minister Abdul Mahdi says, hey, we are going to act on removing U.S. forces there. I do think the United States needs to say, okay, well, here we go. We are going to recognize an independent Kurdistan. And that, again, I think helps secure U.S. interest in the region.
So I've only got a minute and a half. So Mike Pompeo yesterday, Secretary of State, comes on television and says, I don't really care what the Iranian parliament votes. We're not going to heed their call or their directive to take our troops out. How do you keep troops in a country whose government says you want them out? I mean, if they don't want you there, then you're an invasion force. How do you guys justify keeping our young men and women in a country that doesn't want them, that's kicking them out?
Well, again, John, remember that the vote by the Iraqi parliament is non-binding. So ultimately, it's going to be up to the prime minister. Abdul Mahdi has to make a decision about what he is going to do. And if we are then told to leave, there are going to be some tough decisions that have to be made. But remember, Iraq is indeed a sovereign nation. So again, it will force us into some decisions that I think will not be in the best interest of Iraq. So we'll see how it all unfolds. But ultimately, this decision is in the hands of Abdul Mahdi about what happens from this point on.
What do you think he'll do?
I hope that he'll do the right thing. I mean, he has said that he is sympathetic to the vote by the parliament, but I know our ambassador is going by to meet with him today. I hope that he says, hey, we are going to allow U.S. Efforts to continue. There's been some talk about he would put conditions on U.S. presence and say that it would only be to train Iraqi forces there. And, of course, that's part of our mission right now, but we do have the ability to protect our men and women in uniform. So anything that would limit our ability to self-protect there, I think, has to be looked at to say, no, listen, we are not going to have a presence here without the ability for us to self-protect. And that includes going after Iranian efforts there, like the Iranian-backed militia that attacked the United States Embassy. So I don't think that we can tolerate having our ability to self-protect limited by Abdul Mahdi.
Congressman Rob Wittman, subcommittee ranking member, Sea Power Committee. We're out of time. I want to thank you for being with us today and for that great insight, sir. Thank you so much. We look forward to having you on in the near future so we can follow this. And I appreciate the time and your analysis, sir. Thank you.
Well, thanks again, John. You and your listeners have a great week and look forward to being back again with you soon.